There are days that pass through your life like phantoms, silent and unmarked, leaving barely the impression of a breath upon the fabric of memory. But then there are other days, days that approach quietly, yet change everything, not through any outward event, but through the deep trembling that occurs within the soul. I am here to speak to you of such a day, the day you face your shadow, the day you turn inward and find the unknown guest waiting in the dark corridors of your psyche. If you allow yourself to meet this figure, your life will never be the same. But do not imagine that this encounter is the work of an hour or even a single year. The true confrontation with the shadow is an initiation, a journey that unfolds like the petals of a black rose, each layer revealing more of what you never wished to see, yet must discover if you are to become whole. What is the shadow? So often I am asked this question, and yet the answer cannot be given in the form of a definition, any more than one can define the wind or the movement of a dream as it passes through the sleeping mind. The shadow is the sum of all those aspects of ourselves we have rejected, repressed, or denied. It is the living darkness within the personal underworld, populated not by monsters born of ancient myth, but by the neglected parts of your own soul. It is that which you most fear, and yet it is also the very material from which you must shape your destiny. If you wish to become real, the ancients knew the shadow, though they gave it other names: the trickster, the adversary, the serpent, the dweller at the threshold. In dreams it appears as the pursuer, the masked figure, the double, the enemy, and yet, if you gaze closely, you will see your own face reflected in the eyes of the stranger. It is a common illusion to believe that we are wholly conscious, that our waking intentions govern the movement of our lives. But if you have ever acted in a way that baffled you, spoken a word that wounded without meaning to, sabotaged your own happiness, clung to anger, envy, or desire in the quiet of your heart, then you have already felt the hand of the shadow guiding you from the depths. The unconscious is not a passive realm, but a world alive with force, striving for expression, craving recognition. What you ignore within yourself does not simply vanish, it becomes autonomous, alive, a power in its own right. It is a truth as old as the Orphic mysteries, and as close as your own next breath. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Imagine for a moment that you are standing at the threshold of a great forest at dusk. The light is fading. The trees are crowded close together, their branches intertwined like the fingers of forgotten gods. Beyond lies the unknown, the territory of the wild psyche, where logic dissolves and only intuition is a reliable guide. The forest is the symbol of the unconscious, and the path before you is the road of individuation. But who waits just inside the darkness, at the edge where the known dissolves into the unknown? It is the shadow, your silent twin, both adversary and guide. To step forward is to risk everything you think you know about yourself. It is to accept the challenge of wholeness rather than the comfort of fragmentation. Do not misunderstand me. The shadow is not evil, though it may be the source of all that you call evil in yourself and others. It is rather the raw potentiality of the soul, the dark matter of your being, repressed instincts, forgotten talents, painful memories, desires. You have never dared to name these make up the tapestry of the shadow. They are not to be destroyed or banished, but integrated, transformed by the light of consciousness. When the shadow remains unacknowledged, it festers, erupting in projection. You begin to see in others the very qualities you refuse to face in yourself. The friend whose pride annoys you, the rival whose ambition fills you with envy, the stranger who evokes disgust or fear, they are all mirrors, each reflecting an aspect of your own rejected nature. The world becomes a theater of projections, a hall of distorted mirrors in which you are both actor and audience, forever at war with yourself. Yet, the shadow is also the wellspring of creativity, vitality, and authentic power, all that you lack in your conscious persona, all that is wild, passionate, or forbidden resides within the shadow, waiting for your attention. The artist draws inspiration from the same deep wells that feed the shadow. The lover, the revolutionary, the healer, all must drink from these waters if they are to be more than shadows themselves. There is no greatness without descent, no illumination without an encounter with the darkness. The alchemists knew this and named it the nigredo, the blackening, the first stage of the magnum opus, when the matter of the soul is dissolved in order to be reborn. The journey downward is not a fall, but a return to your own roots, to the source of your power, to the unity that underlies the split between light and dark. If you wish to understand the shadow, you must become a student of symbols and dreams, for it is in these liminal spaces that the shadow speaks most clearly. Night after night, the unconscious weaves stories for you, casting you in unfamiliar roles, confronting you with strange companions and terrifying adversaries. The dream is a theater in which the shadow plays many parts. Sometimes it is the pursuer who drives you through endless corridors. Sometimes the monster beneath the water. Sometimes the lost child, the seducer, the betrayer. But look again, what is the message hidden in these dramas? What is the longing, the fear, the unlived life that the shadow is trying to bring into awareness? Each symbol is a cipher, each dream a puzzle whose solution will open a door within you. To work with dreams is to work with the language of the soul. It is to become an archaeologist of your own psyche, unearthing the forgotten artifacts of your inner world. There was once a patient who came to me, tormented by recurring dreams of a house filled with locked doors. In every dream, she wandered from room to room, always searching for something, always anxious, always aware of a presence lurking just beyond the next threshold. For months, she could not bring herself to open the final door, but slowly, as we explored her waking life, she began to realize what that house represented. It was the structure of her own soul, the architecture of her past, her secrets, her fears, her hopes, and the presence she feared. It was her shadow, waiting patiently for her to find the courage to enter. When at last she dreamed of opening the door, she discovered not a monster, but a child herself. At the age when she had first learned to hide her pain, the dream brought tears, but also a sense of release, as if a long exile had ended. This is the work of the shadow, not to terrify, but to reunite you with what is lost, not to punish, but to heal through confrontation. But the path is not without danger. To face the shadow is to risk being overwhelmed, to feel the surge of rage, grief, shame, or longing that you have tried so long to suppress. Many who begin the journey turn back when the darkness grows thick. They seek distraction, justification, the comfort of blaming others. Yet, what you refuse to face will return again and again in ever more insistent forms. The shadow is patient. It does not age. It does not forget. It waits for the moment when you are strong enough to bear its gifts. There are moments in history, collective as well as individual, when the shadow bursts into consciousness, sweeping all before it. In times of upheaval, war, or crisis, societies become possessed by their own repressed energies, projecting evil outward and destroying what they cannot acknowledge within. The atrocities of the 20th century, the violence that scars our world, these are not the products of evil men alone, but of the shadow unleashed, unrecognized, unintegrated, as within, so without. The fate of the world depends upon the work of individuals who have the courage to descend, to meet their own darkness, and return with new wisdom. Each of you has felt the call, though perhaps you did not recognize it. It comes as a sense of restlessness, a longing for something more, a dissatisfaction with the roles you have been given. It is the whisper in the night, the image that haunts your dreams, the crisis that breaks through the surface of your life. You may try to ignore it, to drown it in work, pleasure, or distraction, but the call will not go away. It is the voice of the shadow, asking to be seen, to be known, to be loved. What, then, are you to do? The first step is honesty, a radical, uncompromising honesty with yourself. You must be willing to see what you have hidden, to acknowledge the desires, fears, and wounds you have disowned. This is not a work of the mind alone. It is a work of the heart, of the body, of the imagination. The shadow cannot be integrated through analysis alone. It must be felt, experienced, lived. To approach the shadow is to approach your own sacred wound, the place where you are most vulnerable, and therefore most open to transformation. The shadow is not a static entity, but a process, a movement, a dance between consciousness and the unknown. Every time you reject a part of yourself, the shadow grows stronger. Every time you accept and integrate a forgotten impulse, the shadow is diminished and you become more whole. The work is never finished, for as long as you live, there will always be new territories to explore, new contradictions to resolve. This is the great adventure of the soul, the journey of individuation. As I stand before you, I sense the presence of your shadows gathering in this room, silent, watchful, each unique, each bearing its own gifts and burdens. Some are fierce, others wounded, some are playful, others tragic, but all are part of you, waiting to be acknowledged. You need not fear them, for they are not your enemies. They are the seeds of your future growth, the dark soil from which your greatest strengths will emerge. To love your shadow is to love yourself fully, to embrace the totality of your being, to accept the mystery at the heart of your existence. Let me leave you, for now, with a question to carry into your own night. What have you left in the darkness of your soul, hoping never to find it again? And what might happen if, instead of turning away, you chose to return, to bring the light of your awareness into those forgotten chambers? The day you do this, the day you face your shadow, your life will begin again. And though you may lose the comfort of old illusions, you will gain the only thing worth having, the chance to become who you truly are. As the night deepens and we linger here together, I invite you to listen, not merely with your rational mind, but with that inner sense which awakens at the edges of sleep, the place where images begin to speak and symbols rise unbidden from the depths. If you have ever wandered alone beneath a starless sky, feeling the weight of unseen presences, you already know the landscape of the shadow. It is a territory marked not by signposts, but by intuition, not by roads, but by thresholds crossed in silence. It is here, in this half-lit world, that true transformation begins. When I speak of the shadow, I do not wish to suggest a fixed entity, a thing, to be conquered once and for all. Rather, think of the shadow as the living soil of your inner garden, always present, always fertile, sometimes fallow, sometimes bursting with wild, unexpected growth. The shadow is the sum of all you have cast aside, every longing, every wound, every impulse you once judged and pushed into exile. Yet what is exiled does not die. In the hidden vaults of the unconscious, it waits, dreaming of its return to the sunlight. Each time you dream, each time you are moved by a work of art, startled by a sudden rage, or swept away by forbidden joy, you brush against this hidden world. Let me draw you further into the mysteries of this psychic terrain. Consider the archetypes, those ancient, eternal patterns which inhabit the deep unconscious and shape all human experience. The shadow is but one of many Yet it is the gatekeeper, the necessary adversary, and paradoxically the first companion on the path toward wholeness. It wears 1,000 faces, for it is shaped by your own story, your personal wounds and secrets, and yet beneath these individual forms lies the universal, the trickster, the outlaw, the betrayer, the lost child. Each of these is a mask worn by the self to confront itself, a way for consciousness to encounter what it fears most, and thereby grow. How often do we encounter the shadow and turn away? It happens in small, subtle ways. An angry thought suppressed with a smile, a jealousy rationalized away, a flash of desire buried beneath duty or shame. Sometimes it bursts forth in acts we regret, words we cannot recall, behaviors that seem to possess us. I don't know what came over me. You might say, but something did come over you, the repressed, unacknowledged energy of the shadow, long denied, now claiming its place in the world through you. The shadow does not ask for permission. It seeks to be seen, to be known, to be woven back into the story of the self. And so the process of integration begins. But what does this look like? Imagine a person who has always prided herself on her gentleness, her selflessness, her refusal to harm others. For years she is the helper, the peacemaker, the one who smooths over conflict. But beneath this persona, rage simmers, rage born of betrayal, of unspoken needs, of longings unfulfilled. The rage is her shadow, and it appears in dreams as a wild animal, snarling at the edge of consciousness. She fears it, despises it, believes it must be annihilated. Yet the animal is not her enemy. In fact, it is the source of her power, her boundary, her capacity to protect herself and ultimately to love authentically. To integrate the shadow is to allow the animal to speak, to befriend it, to learn from it. It is not an act of surrender to violence or chaos, but a movement toward inner honesty, toward the fullness of what it means to be human. The shadow is the guardian of the threshold, and to cross into its domain is to enter the world of the archetypal journey. Here, every myth is your myth, every fairy tale, your secret autobiography. The dragon you must face is your own fear. The treasure you seek is your own lost vitality. The labyrinth is the convoluted pattern of your complexes. The hero you see is not the one who slays the dragon, but the one who dares to descend into the darkness, to speak with the dragon, to listen to what the beast has to say. In every descent there is risk, for the shadow contains not only pain, but also the possibility of possession, of being overwhelmed by what you have denied. This is why the work of individuation must be approached with humility and courage, and, when possible, in the company of those who have walked the path before you, dreams, those nightly messengers from the unconscious are our guides in this landscape. You may recall a dream in which you are pursued, hunted by a figure whose face is always just out of view. You run, you hide, your heart pounds, but still the pursuer comes. Perhaps one night, exhausted by flight, you stop and turn to face your pursuer. Suddenly, the dream changes, the fear dissolves, the figure speaks, and you realize the voice is your own. This is the paradox of the shadow. It appears as the enemy, but reveals itself as an ally when confronted with consciousness and openness. The energy bound up in fear becomes available for life. The wound becomes a source of healing. The world itself is woven through with shadow. Every age projects its darkness outward onto the other, the foreigner, the deviant, the scapegoat. Wars are waged not only for land or power, but to banish from the collective mind what cannot be tolerated within. Yet, as long as the shadow is projected, never faced, never integrated, the cycle repeats. History becomes the repetition of unconsciousness, suffering passed from generation to generation like a curse. But the moment a single individual turns inward, faces the shadow, and takes responsibility for their own darkness, the cycle is interrupted. This is why the work you do on yourself is never for yourself alone. It is a healing for the world, a gift to the collective unconscious. Let me tell you a secret, whispered to me by many dreams and confirmed in the hours of my deepest despair. The shadow is not simply a receptacle of pain and shame, but also the bearer of lost potential, forgotten gold. Within your rejected impulses lie seeds of creativity, wildness, love, and freedom. The very thing you fear to face may contain the key to your vitality. The miser's greed can become the artist's drive to create. The coward's fear can become the mystic's awe before the unknown. The rebel's anger can become the prophet's passion for justice. This is the alchemy of the soul, the transmutation of lead into gold, which the old masters sought, not in furnaces, but in the crucible of the heart. If you are willing, begin to notice the moments when you react with disproportionate emotion, an anger that feels too large, a sadness that seems to come from nowhere, a contempt that rises unbidden. These are the footprints of the shadow guiding you toward what wants to be known. Ask yourself, what am I defending against? What must not be spoken? Even in the privacy of my own mind, to become conscious is to allow these questions to breathe, to let the forbidden thought, the ugly feeling, the painful memory enter awareness, not to be acted out blindly, but to be understood, honored, and given a place in the story of who you are. The process is not linear. There will be setbacks, moments when the old patterns reassert themselves, when the shadow bursts forth in ways you regret, but each return is an opportunity for greater honesty, greater compassion. Slowly, the relationship between you and your shadow shifts. What was once a source of terror becomes a wellspring of insight. You begin to see your own story in the faces of others, your own wounds in the wounds of the world. This is the birth of empathy, not as sentimentality, but as a recognition of shared darkness and shared light. I am often asked, is there an end to this work? Will I ever be free of my shadow? My answer is that the shadow is as infinite as the self, for it is the mirror in which the self comes to know itself. The goal is not to be rid of the shadow, but to enter into conscious relationship with it, to dialogue, to negotiate, to dance. In this dance, both partners are changed. Consciousness grows deeper. The shadow grows more luminous until, in rare moments, there is a glimpse of unity, the mysterious coincidentia oppositorum, the union of opposites. This is the goal toward which the soul longs. Not perfection, but wholeness as you walk your own path. Remember that the journey inward is the most courageous act you can undertake. It is easy to wage wars in the world, to change governments, to conquer mountains and cross oceans, but to turn inward, to sit with your own darkness, to listen to the stories your wounds would tell, this is the true hero's journey, the foundation of all real change. And it is never done alone, even when you are most isolated. You are accompanied by the ancient presences within you, by archetypes, by dreams, by the voices of those who have gone before. You are never truly alone on the road to the self. Tonight, as you prepare to leave this hall, I invite you to reflect not only on what has been said, but on what has been stirred within you. Notice the images that rise as you listen, the memories, the fears, the longings. These are the threads of your own shadow, the beginnings of your journey. To face the shadow is to accept the full inheritance of your humanity, the darkness and the light, the wound and the healing, the question and the answer, forever unfolding in mystery. In the hours to come, allow yourself to dream deeply, to wander the inner forests without fear. Trust that whatever you find is not there to destroy you, but to invite you into greater wholeness. The day you face your shadow is the day you begin to awaken, to step out of the endless repetition of fate and into the freedom of choice. This is the task of a lifetime and the gift of being truly alive. To continue in this living dialogue, I must return with you again to the world of dreams, for it is there that the shadow speaks most eloquently, bypassing the sentinels of logic and custom, whispering its truths in the shapes of symbols and the poetry of the night. Do not underestimate the wisdom of your own dreams. Many of you may dismiss them as random noise, but the soul never utters anything by accident. Every image, every strange landscape, every half-remembered figure is a messenger, bearing fragments of the unknown self, pieces of the shadow, calling for recognition in the depths of the unconscious. Opposites are joined, what you call good and evil, light and dark, male and female, all these oppositions, so necessary for the conscious mind to create order, dissolve into fluid movement. You are much more than your waking persona. You are the sum of all your contradictions. And until you accept this, you will be torn by inner conflict. You may try to maintain a face of harmony, of virtue, of perfect control. But beneath, the currents of the unconscious swirl with archetypal energy, never ceasing, never satisfied by surface arrangements. What happens then when you begin to listen? When you cease defending yourself against your own depths and instead lean in, seeking to understand rather than to conquer, a strange thing occurs. The shadow, once so terrifying, becomes a source of profound vitality. There is a rush of energy, a feeling of having touched the root of one's own life. This is not always pleasant. Sometimes it brings anxiety, anger, or grief. Sometimes the encounter brings up guilt so deep it feels primordial, as though you are carrying the pain of ancestors, the weight of entire civilizations. Yet, this too is a revelation, for the unconscious is not only personal but collective. In facing your shadow, you face also the darkness of the human species, the pain of the world. Consider for a moment the symbol of the labyrinth throughout history. This image has haunted the human imagination. The labyrinth is not a simple maze designed to confuse. It is a sacred pattern, an initiatory path. At its center waits the Minotaur, the beast, the shadow in its raw, instinctual form. Most who enter the labyrinth are consumed by terror and flee, or wander lost in endless circles, never reaching the heart. But the one who persists, who moves inward with courage, finds that the monster is not what it seems. Sometimes what appears as a beast is a god in disguise, an image of wild, transformative power that, once integrated, becomes a guardian rather than a threat. The myth of the labyrinth is your myth, the journey of every soul that dares to face its own depths. You may sense the shadow's presence in your emotional life, in the sudden eruptions that disturb your peace, irrational anger, envy, panic, or even inexplicable joy. These are not random, they are eruptions from the shadow, signals that something within you longs to be acknowledged. The mistake is to identify with these emotions, to believe that you are the anger, the envy, the fear. In truth, you are the field in which all these forces arise. Your task is to create space, to allow these visitors to speak, to express their story, and then to integrate their wisdom. This is the meaning of holding the tension of the opposites, a phrase I have used so often in my life's work. To hold the tension is not to choose one side over the other, but to allow both to exist, to recognize that the psyche's wholeness depends on the presence of both light and dark. It is here that the archetype of the wounded healer emerges, a figure as ancient as myth itself. The wounded healer is the one who has journeyed through their own suffering, who has met the shadow, and who returns with gifts of compassion for others. Often, those who have suffered most deeply are called to serve, not because they are unscarred, but precisely because they have confronted their own darkness and learned its language. If you have known pain, if you have felt broken, you are already initiated into the mysteries. Your wounds, far from being mere weaknesses, are the places through which the light of the soul can shine. This is not a romantic notion, but a hard-won truth. Only what has been transformed in the fire of experience can become a source of wisdom for yourself and others. There is a great temptation to seek quick fixes, to imagine that self-knowledge can be achieved through technique or willpower alone. But the soul does not move on command. It reveals itself in its own time. Often, when you least expect it, the practice is one of patience, of waiting, of listening without judgment. When the shadow speaks, it often does so obliquely, a slip of the tongue, a sudden attraction or repulsion, an impulse to sabotage, a longing you cannot name. Each of these is a thread, a clue to the larger tapestry of your being. If you follow these threads with curiosity rather than fear, you will find that your life becomes richer, more complex, more alive. Let me speak to you now of the power of projection. Projection is the unconscious act of attributing to others what you refuse to acknowledge in yourself. It is as natural as breathing, but it is the cause of immense suffering in the world. How many wars have been waged? How many friendships shattered? How many families torn apart because people could not see that what they hated in others was their own unrecognized shadow. The enemy is always, at first, within. The path of individuation asks you to withdraw these projections, to claim your own darkness, to accept that you are not wholly light, nor wholly dark, but a mystery that contains both. This is not easy. It is a kind of death, the death of illusions, the loss of innocence. To see yourself truly is to experience humility, even humiliation. Yet there is freedom here, the freedom to live without the compulsions of denial. As you gather back your projections, you will notice that others lose their power over you. You become less easily manipulated, less prone to anger or envy, more capable of love. You become, in a word, real. The shadow is not only a source of difficulty, but of tremendous creativity. Many of the world's greatest artists, writers, and innovators have drawn their inspiration from the forbidden places within. The poet who gives voice to longing, the painter who dares to reveal pain, the musician who channels rage or ecstasy, they are all servants of the shadow, transforming darkness into beauty. This is not a matter of glorifying suffering, but of recognizing that true art emerges from the whole person, not merely the acceptable parts. If you wish to create, truly create. Do not fear your shadow. Invite it to the table. Listen to its stories. Allow it to shape your work. In doing so, you will touch others. For the language of the shadow is universal. How can you begin to practice this in your own life? There is no formula, no step-by-step guide. Rather, it is a stance, an attitude of openness and courage. When a difficult emotion arises, resist the urge to judge or suppress. Instead, become curious. Ask, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What part of me have I neglected, denied, or abandoned? Notice when you are quick to blame others, this is the moment to turn inward. When you find yourself drawn compulsively to a person, a situation, or a pattern, pause and wonder. What is the unconscious seeking here? What treasure lies hidden in this repetition? The journey is not linear. There will be regressions, times when you fall back into old habits, moments when you wish you could return to ignorance. But remember, every descent is also a preparation for ascent. Each time you face the shadow, you expand your capacity for compassion, for understanding, for genuine relationship with yourself and with others. Let me remind you again, you are not alone in this work. The shadow is universal. Every person you meet is engaged in their own silent struggle with the unknown within. If you learn to see this, you will find the world softened by empathy. Even those who appear most lost, most violent, most hostile, they too are wrestling with their own darkness. Perhaps you are here tonight because you have already felt the call, the strange longing to become whole, to know yourself not as an idea, but as a living mystery. The day you face your shadow is the day you become a participant in your own life. Rather than a spectator, you step out of the shadows of fate and into the freedom of destiny. This is the task of a lifetime and the privilege of being human. The soul longs for wholeness, and it will call you again and again until you listen. Listen well, for your life depends on it. We have traveled far tonight, you and I. Though we have not left our seats, we have wandered through dreamscapes, gazed into the eyes of archetypes, and stood at the very threshold where the known dissolves into the unknown. And yet, as with all real journeys, there is always further to go, always another veil to lift, another chamber within the soul where the shadow lingers. Both guardian and gatekeeper of transformation, let us descend for time into the silence that lives beneath words. The most profound moments of the encounter with the shadow are not those filled with thunder or revelation, but those of quiet intimacy, as if sitting beside a wounded animal, waiting with gentle patience for trust to grow. In the end, it is this humility, this willingness to abide with what is uncomfortable, that softens the barriers within. Much suffering comes from our refusal to listen, from our anxious efforts to explain away or justify our own pain, or to make ourselves into something more acceptable in the eyes of a world equally terrified of its own darkness. Do not be seduced by the fantasy that you can finally be rid of your shadow, or that integration is a project with a neat conclusion. The psyche, like nature, is cyclical. The work turns in spirals, returning us again and again to the themes we believed we had resolved. Old wounds reopen in new forms. Patterns repeat themselves with subtle variation. What matters is not that you conquer the shadow, but that you remain in relationship with it, vigilant, receptive, honest. Each return is a deepening, each encounter another chance to draw meaning from mystery. Perhaps you have noticed at certain moments how the face of the shadow shifts. Sometimes it is fierce, full of rage, jealousy, or bitterness. Sometimes it is vulnerable, carrying shame, sorrow, or the pain of exclusion. Sometimes, most disorienting of all, it appears as a strange joy, a wild, liberating laughter rising from some forgotten well. In each guise, it is asking the same thing. Will you see me? Will you recognize me as part of yourself? When you do, a new possibility opens. You are no longer at the mercy of unconscious forces. You have become a co-creator of your own fate. I have said before, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the paradox at the center of the inner life. The temptation to seek only the positive, to fill oneself with affirmations and images of perfection, is strong in every age. But without the descent into darkness, without the willingness to carry what is heavy, wisdom cannot take root. The tree of life grows not only toward the sun, but deep into the earth, where its roots entwine with all that is hidden and decayed. Only then does it withstand the storms. You may find, as you make the unconscious conscious, that you begin to see the world differently. The qualities you once hated or feared in others become occasions for self-reflection, not condemnation. The friend whose arrogance infuriated you now becomes a mirror for your own denied pride. The competitor whose ambition stung you now reveals your own hunger for significance. Even the criminal, the outcast, the stranger at the edge of society, each becomes a symbol, a reminder of the dark potentiality in yourself and in every human soul. This does not mean that all is permitted, that evil is to be excused, but rather that true morality arises from self-knowledge, not from denial or scapegoating. How easy it is to judge. The world is full of those who, rather than face their own shadow, cast it onto others, individuals, nations, even whole races. The collective shadow is as dangerous as the personal, and history is its testimony. Persecution, fanaticism, war, all born from the refusal to see the enemy within. If enough individuals begin the work of inner reconciliation, the world itself is changed, subtly but irrevocably. This is why I say, the fate of humanity rests not in the hands of heroes or leaders, but in the quiet, unseen work of countless souls willing to face themselves. There are two moments of grace. Sometimes, as if by accident, we are shown a glimpse of our wholeness. It may come in a dream, a moment of creative inspiration, or a fleeting sense of connection with another person, a sense that, for an instant, all parts of oneself belong, even those once banished or feared. This is the healing the ancients sought in ritual, the reconciliation symbolized in alchemy as the union of sun and moon, king and queen, conscious and unconscious. It is not a permanent state, for life is always moving, always undoing and remaking itself. But these moments are seeds. They remind you of the possible. If you have journeyed long enough, you may discover a strange reversal. The more you befriend your shadow, the less power it has to sabotage your life. What was once a source of fear becomes a source of guidance. You sense danger before it erupts. You feel compassion where before there was only judgment. Even your suffering acquires a kind of dignity, for you understand its origins and can trace its lineaments with the clarity of self-knowledge. To stand in this space is not to be perfect, but to be fully human, no longer divided against yourself, but capable of living with your own contradictions. The archetype of the self hovers ever at the horizon of this work. The self is not the ego, not the I who navigates the world of daily affairs, but the totality of the psyche, the unifying principle that seeks to harmonize all opposites within. The shadow is but one aspect of the self's mystery, the part most commonly denied, but when you open the doors to the shadow, you set in motion a process that draws together all the scattered fragments of your soul. This is individuation, not the pursuit of an ideal, but the becoming of what you truly are. It is a pilgrimage with no fixed destination, only a deepening realization that you belong to yourself, to life, to the world. Art, myth, and religion are all expressions of this movement toward wholeness. The greatest stories are always about descent and return, death and rebirth, exile and homecoming. Odysseus wandering the seas, Dante journeying through hell, the shaman descending to the underworld, each is an image of the soul's pilgrimage. The necessity of losing oneself in order to be found anew. Even the Christian story, for those who look deeply, is not only about ascent to the light, but about the harrowing of hell, the redeeming of what was lost. Let me offer you this. Your shadow is not a mistake, nor is it an accident. It is the necessary counterweight to your conscious striving, the root from which your uniqueness grows. If you spend your life trying to be only good, you will become rigid, brittle, cut off from the depths. If you surrender entirely to the shadow, you risk being possessed, losing the gift of self-determination. But if you remain in relationship, moving always between light and dark, you become resilient, flexible, creative, capable of great love and great understanding. What does this look like? Practically, sometimes it is nothing more than allowing yourself to feel what you feel without explanation or justification. Sometimes it is the quiet courage to say, this too is part of me. Sometimes it is the hard labor of making amends, of owning harm done, or of forgiving yourself for wounds you could not help inflicting. There will be days of darkness, days when you feel lost or broken, but even these are part of the journey, for the shadow has its own wisdom, its own slow unfolding logic. Trust that nothing is wasted, not sorrow, not error, not even the times you stumble blindly into pain. As I come to the end of these words, I invite you to pause, to let silence fill the space between us. Let the images that have arisen linger in your mind. You have begun a conversation not only with me, but with the oldest, most mysterious part of yourself. Do not rush to close the door. Instead, listen. The shadow is always speaking, if only you have the patience to hear.